Hey, friends! Barkey Dog here, back with another movie review. Erwin Cannonball Baker was a famous racing enthusiast from the dawn of the 20th century who set all kinds of records. In 1909, he won the first race held at the Indianapolis Speedway. He crossed the country many times to promote motorcycle and car brands. In 1933, he raced from New York to Los Angeles in 53 and a half hours, a record that stood for 40 years. Now, there are lots of comedic racing movies, such as The Great Race and stuff like that, but we're going to focus on movies that were an offshoot of a real underground cross-country race that took place in the 1970s and 80s. The Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash. It was a real thing cooked up by Car and Driver magazine to honor Erwin Baker and protest the new 55-mile-per-hour speed limit being enforced across America. The rules were that there were no rules. The best time from New York to LA, 1. Anyone could enter and use any motorized land vehicle they wanted. Any expenses, tickets they got, or accidents they were in were the responsibility of the contestants. To start things off, we're looking at the Gumball Rally from 1976. Now, one of my viewers, Michael, he kindly sent me this here Blu-ray off of my wish list. Thanks, man! For some reason, I'd never seen this picture before, and it was a real surprise, and it led me down this here rabbit hole. Our story goes like this. Michael Bannon is a big executive at a candy company. Well, bored out of his mind at a board meeting one day, he decides to pick up the phone and make a call to a friend in Los Angeles. He utters one word: Gumball. This is the code word that sets in motion a race from sea to shining sea these drivers hold every year. Multiple teams gather in New York while a cop plans to bust them, eventually chasing the racers all across America, imploring local police departments to help him capture the driver. We follow our heroes across the country as they race, not for money, not for fame, but simply for the honor of winning the challenge. They also get this trophy at the end, made out of a gumball machine. In our cast, we have Michael Sarrazin, Gary Busey, and Raul Julia. We also have J. Pat O'Malley, who we last saw in my review of Hey There, It's Yogi Bear. With him in his Mercedes is Vaughn Taylor, a longtime character actor who appeared in a metric ton of stuff, including Psycho, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, The Shakiest Gun in the West, Jailhouse Rock, and many, many more. This was his last film role. Check this out. You have these cars blazing through the streets of New York City at the start of the race. Pretty sure this was shot on a Sunday morning with proper traffic control, but probably not something you could do today. This thing is fun and doesn't hang around. You're with the teams of drivers following their various vehicles the whole way, and the movie goes along at a good pace. Next up, we have the Cannonball Run from 1981. Again, we have the cross-country race, the Cannonball, only this time, instead of a crappy trophy and personal glory, there's a pile of money as the prize. We again have several teams we follow over the course of the movie as they vie to win the cash prize. In our cast, we have Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, Farrah Fawcett, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr., Roger Moore, Bert Convey, Mel Tillis, Jack Elam, Adrian Barbeau, Peter Fonda, Jamie Farr as a wealthy sheik. We have Jackie Chan, John Fielder from Star Trek. He played Mr. Hengist in the episode Wolf in the Fold. And if you look fast, you'll see Valerie Perrin, Miss Tessmacher from the Superman movies. And there are many, many more. This one has some fun stuff in it. You got Dino and Sammy. Jackie Chan shows off some kung fu and he drives a high-tech Japanese car full of gadgets. Roger Moore basically plays himself, but as James Bond, driving with a tricked-out Aston Martin, complete with accompanying Bond-like theme music, no less. Dom DeLuise transforms into his superhero identity of Captain Chaos, an unstoppable force for justice. There's stunts and crashes galore, and no wonder, as the movie was directed by Hal Needham. Needham was a stuntman turned director and did several pictures with Burt Reynolds. He also directed the greatest picture of all time. Deeds, not words. But for all that, I've got to say, this movie isn't very good. It's all over the place, a veritable hodgepodge of a narrative structure that takes way too long to get going and isn't as exciting as it ought to have been. But it's full of such memorable moments that it was fairly successful and it led to the inevitable sequel, Cannonball Run 2 from 1984. Basically the same story, the cross-country race with the teams of drivers competing for cash. We have Burt and Dom DeLuise, Jackie Chan, Dino, Sammy, and Jamie Farr is back as the Sheik. There were some changes, though. Roger Moore didn't come back for this one, and he later said he regretted not doing the movie. Farrah Fawcett also did not return, and the team of sexy chicks were a different set of sexy chicks. Catherine Bach and Susan Anton. Yeah. Other new additions to the cast are Mary Lou Henner and Shirley MacLaine, Tony Danza, Richard Kiel, Telly Savalas, Abe Vigoda, Doug McClure, Charles Nelson Riley, and on and on. Cameos include Don Knotts and Tim Conway as cops, Jim Neighbors as a soldier, Henry Silva, Sid Caesar, Foster Brooks, Artie Johnson, Dub Taylor, Ricardo Montalban, and many more. Not to mention, the chairman himself joins in what became his last screen role. He did a few television appearances after this, but Cannonball Run 2 was Frank Sinatra's last screen appearance. This movie is much better than its predecessor, a rare case where the sequel is an improvement over the original. It flows much better. That is, until the last third or so, where the Cannonballers deviate from the race. They have to team up and go rescue the Sheik from some kidnappers, and they all join in instead of just going on to the finish line. But I guess it makes sense in that the Sheik put up the $1 million prize money, and he was carrying it with him. But it does indeed take us out of the racing action. In a way, Cannonball Run 2 was the last Rat Pack movie. Frank, Dino, and Sammy are all on hand, along with Shirley MacLaine, who often hung out with them. Then there was this movie, Cannonball Run 3, better known as Speed Zone from 1989. Now, this was supposed to be Cannonball Run 3, but Burt Reynolds turned it down, wanting to get away from his loose cannon good old boy image and make more serious films. Since Burt said no, Dom DeLuise also said no, so no Captain Chaos. There were problems getting funding and getting things moving, and eventually the movie became Speed Zone, more of an unofficial sequel than an actual sequel. The name of the race is still the Cannonball Run, and Jamie Farr reprises his role as the Sheik, although he doesn't actually participate in the race. Farr was the only original cast member to return for this one. While the opening and closing segments were shot in the United States, the bulk of the movie was shot in Canada, and it shows. But there are some name brands on hand. John Candy is here, as is Eugene Levy. Oh, look at that hair! And Joe Flaherty, all from SCTV. Matt Frewer from Max Headroom is on hand, as are Melody Anderson, Shari Belafonte, and Donna Dixon. We have the Smothers Brothers, Peter Doyle and Tim Matheson. Cameos include Lee Van Cleef, Brooke Shields, Alyssa Milano, I'm pretty sure that's her, and John Schneider from the Dukes of Hazzard. We also have one of my favorite Canadian actors, Louis Delgrand, who starred in Seeing Things, a show about a Nebuchadnezzar newspaper reporter who has visions which help him solve crimes. I love that show, just something about it. This one is a bit slow to get going, but it does pick up in the last third of the movie or so when a jet passenger plane gets involved. Speed Zone has never been issued on DVD, but it can be found on VHS and on YouTube. That's where I found it. It's not bad, but the law of diminishing returns does come into play. I think where the Cannonball series differs from the Gumball Rally is that the race is the driving, motivating factor in the Gumball Rally, while the Cannonball movies are not about the race. They're about the personalities of the contestants. They're bigger and have way more star power, but the Gumball Rally comes off as much more polished and has a more cohesive storyline. There's one more of these movies we need to talk about, and that was a movie which, like the Gumball Rally, also came out in 1976, called simply Cannonball, also known as Carquake in the UK. This isn't related to the other films, but it is about the same cross-country race, and it does involve a cash prize. Again, we have a cast of name brands and cameos. David Carradine of Kung Fu fame is our main protagonist. Dick Miller plays his brother, and Carradine's real-life brother, Robert, plays a young racer. We have the screen debut of Veronica Hamill, who went on to star on Hill Street Blues. She also played Lily Munster in a Munsters revival, and we last saw her in this god-awful thing, The Last Leprechaun. Ugh, that movie was lousy. She was good, though. For cameos, director Roger Corman is a district attorney. Director Joe Dante is in here somewhere. I didn't spot him, but he's here. Martin Scorsese and Sylvester Stallone appear as thugs working for Cannonball director Paul Bartel, who plays the main bad guy. And we also have the Ozark Nightingale, the queen of corn herself, Judy Canova. Judy started out in vaudeville as a singer, a dancer, and a champion yodeler. What was she like? Well, think of her as sort of a Carol Burnett for the previous generation in the 30s and 40s. Although Carol Burnett was way more versatile, because Carol Burnett. Canova crafted a persona for herself of a country bumpkin hillbilly type that was very popular. She often played over-the-top, man-hungry, plain Jane characters like Carol did. She starred in a very successful series of films for Republic Pictures, had popular record albums, and had her own radio show. Her appearance in Cannonball was her last screen role. And, if that wasn't enough, Run Run Shaw of the Shaw Brothers fame was a producer on this film. So this one is mostly meant to be a comedy, and there are some fun things in it. Most of it is pretty straightforward that way, but there are also these dark elements that just kinda crop up out of nowhere from time to time, which only makes the proceedings less fun. The director, Paul Bartel, had just made Death Race 2000, which was a hit for him, but he hated making this picture, apparently, and didn't care about cars or racing. Cannonball just wasn't a movie he wanted to make. It doesn't show for the most part, but then there are these dark elements popping up, like some characters get killed off, and there's this huge car wreck. A veritable holocaust of crashing, exploding vehicles, and you don't see any of the drivers escaping from the burning cars. So are they all dead or what? Kind of a grim for a comedy. So this one wasn't my favorite, and it's a shame because it had a lot of good things in it. The movie really should have been more lighthearted. All the rest of these are. Besides the cross-country race, all of these pictures feature the same general elements, such as a car being carried aboard another vehicle, most often as a means to avoid the police, and in the case of Cannonball, one guy uses a plane to carry his car so he can cheat. The driver's having a run-in with a biker gang. Most have some kind of silly police or government authority figure trying to stop the racers, and all of them have one team of drivers comprised of sexy chicks. And all of the movies have a large cast and sport several brand names as well as a ton of cameos and character actors. While all of them do have some fun, memorable moments, out of all these, I thought the Gumball Rally was still the best picture. It seems the purest version of the story of the famous race, and it maintains its lighthearted tone throughout. As for the race itself, the real-life Cannonball Run, the Cannonball Baker Sea to Shining Sea Memorial Trophy Dash, the best winning time was 32 hours and 51 minutes. After 4 official races, it was never run again by the original creators at Car and Driver. Why? They stated increased policing, urban sprawl, liability, and the sheer stupidity of racing on public roads as all being factors. There were a lot of copycats in the US, Australia, and Europe, and a reality TV show based on the concept aired in 2001, which you can find on Amazon Prime, if you want to bother. I didn't. Anyway, the race is something very organically American. Open highways, driving fast, wasting gas, flouting the law, mixed with sheer lunkheadedness. What's more American than that? All it's missing is guns and apple pie. These were fun to watch, so go ahead and give them a spin. You take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.